Hashtag Trending would like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and cellular in one integrated solution that's built for performance and scale. You can find them at meter.com/HTT. Microfirings are now the dominant form of layoffs. New research shows AI guardrails can be bypassed with nonsense text. Running your own AI model is now within reach for ordinary users. HR leaders say AI will reshape nearly 90% of jobs next year, and if you have a pirated copy of Windows, it might have stopped working. Here's why. Welcome to Hashtag Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. We've heard so much about layoffs this past year that it's easy to focus only on the big announcements. But according to a new analysis from Glassdoor, the real story isn't the headline-grabbing cuts. It's the much smaller ones happening continuously. Glassdoor says these micro-firings, where companies let go of fewer than 50 people at a time, now account for just over half of all reported layoffs in 2025. A decade ago, these small cuts made up only 38% of layoffs. Glassdoor's lead researcher Chris Martin says the data points to what the firm calls forever layoffs, rolling low-visibility reductions that happen year-round instead of during a single restructuring. Companies appear to favor this approach because a few departures at a time attract less scrutiny and can be framed as routine adjustments. But the impact on workers is still significant. People lose jobs the same way, and those who remain take on extra work while wondering if another quiet round is coming. Glassdoor's review data shows terms like layoff and job insecurity now appear more than they did in March 2020. A study from the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School reports a similar trend, noting that employee well-being hit a new low last year. The labor market isn't offering much reassurance. Hiring is slowing, economic uncertainty is rising, and concerns about AI replacing roles are now a regular part of the workplace conversations. And while micro-firings have become the norm, large cuts will still happen. Verizon's recent 15,000-person reduction is its largest ever. Glassdoor warns that these quiet, persistent layoffs may shape workplace culture well beyond the next economic cycle, leaving employees less secure and potentially less committed as colleagues disappear without warning. We've heard so much about jailbreaks and large language models that it sometimes feels like the companies behind them simply aren't trying hard enough. But maybe that's not the truth. Maybe they're trying hard enough, but the model that they're working with is fundamentally flawed. When models were first trained not to make explosives, for instance, users learned to bypass that rule by reframing the request. They said they were rehearsing for a play and asked the model to act as the character who gives the instructions. The model would refuse the direct request, but complied with the theatrical one. Companies found that loophole, and they patched it. Users found another and another. The hope was that enough iterations would eventually lead to a stable set of guardrails. But a cybersecurity firm called Hidden Layer says the issue may not be the rules. It might be the very foundation those rules rely on. Most guardrail systems use the same pattern recognition method. They're trained on harmful prompts and safe prompts, and they learn to flag requests that resemble the bad examples. Hidden Layer compares this to a nightclub bouncer who judges entrance based on patterns, clothing, posture, keywords. The researchers found that if you generate the right nonsense pattern, you can reliably fool the bouncer. It acts like giving the guard a password or a secret handshake that makes him ignore the other signs he was trained to watch for. Hidden Layer's method, called echogram, searches for gaps in a guardrail's training data and produces what it calls flip tokens, meaningless sequences that change whether the guardrail flags a request. In some tests, adding something as trivial as $coffee was enough to get through. In others, longer strings of engineered gibberish produced the same effect. These sequences don't change the meaning of the prompt, only whether it gets blocked. And because echogram targets the guardrail, not the underlying model, the system still processes the unfiltered prompt once the safety layer steps aside. Hidden Layer says this works across multiple models because they all rely on the same example-driven foundation. The warning is clear. Attackers can slip harmful prompts through guardrails, and defenders can be flooded with false alarms. If the weakness lives in the structure of the guardrails themselves, patching one jailbreak at a time will not fix the underlying problem. What would you do if you could have your own personal private AI, one that runs entirely on your own computer? Even if that's not something you're thinking about today, the fact is it's possible, and it's a measure of how far AI has come. A new guide from a company called Decrypt shows how open-source tools that once required specialized hardware now run smoothly on everyday laptops and compact desktops. And they're a breeze to install. Tools like Ollama, LM Studio, and GPT for All hide most of the configuration work, offering simple interfaces for downloading and managing local models. This used to be the domain of researchers and hobbyists. Now, it's accessible to anyone. And the models themselves have become surprisingly capable. In benchmark tests, Ollama 8 billion parameter model scored almost 67% on the MMLU knowledge test, one of the big benchmarks. A much larger 70 billion parameter system, roughly 8 times bigger, scores 79%. And the huge 405 billion parameter version, more than 50 times the size, reaches 85%. Small models can't match the largest generalists, but they don't need to. Tuned for specific tasks, they can be excellent at what they do. And in addition, models like Qwen, DeepSeek, and Kimi continue to show what compact, efficient systems can really do. Decrypt notes that these smaller models are already good enough for writing, translation, coding support, document analysis, and fluent offline chat, all without sending any data to the cloud. Hardware demands have also fallen. Most people now run 7 to 8 billion parameter models on what are consumer laptops, and more advanced models on modest gaming class desktops. The trend is clear. AI is shifting from something you can only access in the cloud to something you can increasingly run privately and personally. And where we go from there is anybody's guess. Despite the steady drumbeat of layoffs in the past year, more than 160,000 jobs were lost in the United States in October. Most weren't attributed to AI, but that could change soon. A new CNBC survey of HR leaders said AI is set to impact nearly 90% of jobs in the coming year. In the survey of hundreds of HR executives, 89% expect AI to reshape roles in 2026 by automating tasks or redefining responsibilities. More than half expect outright restructuring as AI becomes embedded in everyday workflows. And the changes are moving deeper. Some organizations now plan to use AI in a vast range of HR roles, for instance. And Meta, in a recent article, said it intends to use AI systems to help assess job performance, a move that could change how employees are reviewed and promoted. There's also a preparedness gap. Workers fear replacement, but HR leaders are also saying they can't find enough people who know how to work effectively with AI. And yet, only 27% feel ready to retrain their staff at scale. The picture that emerges is less about sudden mass layoffs and more about rapid, broad changes in how work gets done. HR leaders describe 2026 as a pivot year when AI tools move from experimental add-ons to core components of everyday work. And finally, if you're using a pirated version of Microsoft Windows, you might have noticed it just stopped working. Microsoft has shut down the widely used KMS38 activation hack, and the company's November patch disables those unofficial activators. Systems relying on that method now revert to an unactivated state. Microsoft has been pretty laid back about piracy in the past. There was even a rumor at one point that Bill Gates thought that pirated copies of Windows helped spread it around the world. But the bigger risk isn't the activation patch. It's how pirated copies are spread. I'm not here to lecture anyone on morality, but the practicality of this can't be ignored. Pirated software is one of the top ways criminals get malware into corporate and personal systems. Cracked installers often carry hidden Trojans or even ransomware. A compromised home device that later connects to a corporate VPN can be enough to infect a business network. That can lead to encrypted drives, deleted data, operational shutdowns, and even significant financial losses. And even if the person who installed the pirated software never faces personal consequences, the fallout can mean disruption, sometimes job losses, maybe even the failure of the company itself. Microsoft may have closed one activation loophole, but if you find somebody who's affected by that, have a talk with them, because the broader reminder still stands. Whether it's Windows or anything else, free software can have a very, very high price. And that's our show. Once again, we'd like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. And working with their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required to get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity into your space. They design the hardware, the firmware, build the software, manage deployments, and run support. It's a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses all the way to data centers. Book a demo at meter.com/HTT. That's meter.com/HTT. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a marvelous Monday.